The blizzard hit Weaverville, California, with a fury that seemed determined to bury everything pure and good beneath its merciless white blanket. And when Lily Vaughn watched the last ember die in her stone hearth, she understood that sometimes hope freezes to death just as surely as flesh and bone. It was January 1878, and the mining town nestled in the Trinity Mountains had seen harsh winters before, but nothing quite like this. Lily pressed her trembling hands against the cold glass of her small cabin window, watching the snow pile higher against the wooden walls. Her breath fogged the pane, obscuring the white wasteland beyond. She pulled her threadbare shawl tighter around her shoulders, feeling the cold seep through every crack in the walls. She was 22 years old and entirely alone. Her father had died 6 months prior in a mining accident, crushed beneath a timber support that gave way too soon. Her mother had passed 2 years before that, taken by pneumonia during another brutal winter. Lily had managed through spring and summer, taking in laundry and mending clothes for the miners and their families, scraping together just enough to keep herself fed and sheltered. But winter had come early and stayed late, and the small savings she had accumulated had dwindled to nothing. The last of her firewood had burned 3 hours ago. The last of her food, a heel of stale bread, had been eaten yesterday morning. Her stomach cramped with hunger, but worse than that was the cold. It was the kind of cold that made your bones ache, that made thinking difficult, that whispered seductive lies about how easy it would be to just lie down and sleep. Lily moved away from the window and wrapped herself in both of her blankets, sitting on the edge of her narrow bed. Her dark hair hung loose around her shoulders, and her blue eyes, usually bright with determination, had grown dull with exhaustion and despair. She had knocked on neighbors' doors yesterday, but most families were struggling themselves, rationing their own supplies to last through the seemingly endless winter. The few who had offered help had so little to spare that Lily had refused, unable to take food from the mouths of children. She thought about walking to the general store, but she had no money, and Mr. Henderson had already extended her as much credit as he dared. She thought about the church, but Reverend Thomas had left town 3 weeks ago to visit his ailing sister in Sacramento, and had not yet returned, trapped somewhere by the same storms that held Weaverville hostage. The wind howled outside, rattling the shutters and finding every gap in the walls. Lily lay down on the bed, pulling the blankets over her head, curling into herself for warmth. Her thoughts drifted to her parents, to happier times before death and winter had stolen everything. She wondered if this was how it would end for her, if they would find her here in the spring when the snow finally melted, just another casualty of the harsh mountain winter. She must have slept, because she woke to the sound of something heavy hitting her front porch. Lily sat up, disoriented and colder than before. The light coming through the window was dim, suggesting late afternoon. Another thump and then the sound of boots on wood. Someone was on her porch. Her heart raced. It could be anyone, a neighbor checking on her, or someone with worse intentions. In a town full of rough miners and transient prospectors, a woman alone was always vulnerable, but she was too cold and too hungry to care much about danger anymore. If someone meant her harm, at least it would be over quickly. The knock on the door was firm but not aggressive. "Miss Vaughn." "You in there?" The voice was unfamiliar, deep and male, with a slight drawl that suggested Southern origins. Lily unwrapped herself from the blankets and stood on unsteady legs. She moved to the door but did not open it. "Who is it?" Her voice came out weaker than she intended. "Name is Mason Parker, madam. I am staying at the boarding house and Mrs. Chen mentioned you might need some help. I brought firewood." Lily's hand went to the door latch, then hesitated. "I cannot pay you." There was a pause. Did not ask you to, madam. It is colder than a witch's heart out here, and nobody should be without a fire in this weather. You going to let me bring this wood in, or should I just leave it on the porch? Something in his tone, matter of fact and without pity, made Lily open the door. The blast of cold air that rushed in nearly knocked her backward, but then her eyes focused on the man standing there, and for a moment she forgot about the cold entirely. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders made even broader by the heavy coat he wore. Snow dusted his dark hair and clung to his thick beard. His eyes were a striking gray, like storm clouds, and they took in her appearance with a quick, assessing glance that seemed to miss nothing. He looked to be in his late 20s, maybe 30 at most, with the weathered face of someone who spent most of his time outdoors. "You look half frozen," he said, his expression darkening with concern. "Let me get this wood inside." He did not wait for permission, moving past her with an armful of split logs. He went straight to the fireplace and began arranging them with the practiced efficiency of someone who had built many fires in his life. Lily closed the door against the wind and watched him work, too stunned by this sudden appearance to know what to say. Within minutes, he had a fire started, coaxing flames from kindling and feeding them carefully until the larger logs caught. Heat began to radiate into the room, and Lily moved toward it like a moth to light, holding her hands out to the growing warmth. Mason stood and brushed off his hands, then looked at her again. "When did you last eat?" Lily's pride flared weakly. "I am managing." "That was not what I asked." His tone was gentle but firm. "When?" "Yesterday morning." He shook his head and moved toward the door. "I will be right back." "Wait," Lily said, but he was already gone, the door closing behind him. She stood by the fire, feeling the warmth seep back into her frozen limbs, and wondered what manner of man this Mason Parker was. She heard him on the porch, and then he returned with another armload of wood, which he stacked beside the fireplace. He left again and came back with a canvas bag. "Sit down," he said, nodding toward her small table. "You do not have to do this." "I know I do not have to. I am choosing to. Now sit down before you fall down." There was something about the way he said it, without condescension but with a certainty that brooked no argument, that made Lily obey. She sank into one of her 2 wooden chairs and watched as he unpacked the bag. Bread, cheese, dried meat, a tin of beans, coffee, and a small sack of cornmeal. He found her pot and pan and set about preparing a meal with the same efficiency he had shown in building the fire. "I cannot accept all this," Lily said, even as her mouth watered at the sight of the food. "You can, and you will." Mason found her kettle, went to the door and filled it with clean snow which he set on the stove to melt and boil. "Mrs. Chen told me about your situation, about your father. I am sorry for your loss. Did she tell you I am a charity case?" He glanced at her, and she saw something shift in his eyes, a flash of understanding. "She told me you are a proud woman who has been doing her best in difficult circumstances. She told me you have helped half the families in this town with your sewing and never once complained about late payment. She told me winter has been hard on everyone, but especially hard on those living alone." Lily felt her throat tighten with emotion. "I do not want to be a burden." "Then do not be." He cut slices of bread and cheese and brought them to her. "Eat this while I make something hot." She wanted to refuse, but the hunger was too strong. She took the bread and cheese and ate slowly, trying not to devour it like an animal. The food seemed to wake up her entire body, and with it came a rush of feeling, cold and warmth and hunger and gratitude, all mixed together. Mason worked quietly, heating the beans and making coffee. The cabin filled with the smell of food and wood smoke, and for the first time in days, Lily felt something other than despair. She watched him move around her small kitchen area as if he had every right to be there, and she found she did not mind. There was something calming about his presence, something solid and dependable. When the beans were hot, he divided them between 2 plates and brought them to the table, along with 2 cups of coffee. He sat across from her and began to eat, not with the urgency of hunger but with the steady pace of someone fueling his body for work. "You are not from around here," Lily said, breaking the silence. "Texas, originally, been moving around since the war ended." "That was more than 10 years ago." "It was." He met her eyes. "Some of us had no home to go back to. Figured I might as well keep moving, see the country, do honest work where I could find it." "What brings you to Weaverville?" "Heard there was ranch work in the area. I am a cattleman, not a miner, but winter caught me here. I have been doing odd jobs around town, waiting for the passes to clear so I can move on to the valley. There are not many cattle ranches in these mountains. There are some in the valleys below. That is where I am headed once this damned snow lets up." He sipped his coffee. "What about you?" "You have family elsewhere." Lily shook her head. "My mother's people were back east, but I never knew them. My father came west during the gold rush and never looked back. It was just the 3 of us, and now it is just me. No prospects, no young man courting you." She felt her cheeks warm. "There was someone once. A miner. But he moved on to Nevada last year when the claims here started playing out. I think he was more interested in my father's modest strike than in me anyway." Mason's expression hardened slightly. "Then he was a fool." The simple statement, delivered without flattery or pretense, made Lily's heart skip. She looked down at her plate, suddenly shy. "You do not know me well enough to make that judgment. I know you were too proud to take charity even when you were freezing and starving. I know you have been helping your neighbors even when you did not have much yourself. I know you opened your door to a stranger because he offered firewood without asking for anything in return. That tells me plenty about your character." Lily looked up and found him watching her with those steady gray eyes. There was no romance in his expression, just honest assessment, but something in his gaze made her feel seen in a way she had not felt in a long time. They finished their meal in companionable silence. When they were done, Mason stood and began clearing the plates. Lily rose to help, but he waved her back. "You need to get warm and rest. That fire should keep you comfortable through the night, and there is enough wood on the porch for a few more days. If the snow lets up, I will bring more." "Why are you doing this?" The question came out before she could stop it. Mason paused, his hands in the wash basin. He was quiet for a long moment, and Lily thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and thoughtful. "I had a sister, back in Texas. She was about your age when I left for the war. When I came back, I found out she had died the winter before. Pneumonia. Her husband had been killed at Shiloh, and she was trying to make it on her own, too proud to ask for help until it was too late." He turned to face her. "I was not there to help her, but I am here now and I can help you. That is reason enough." Lily felt tears prick her eyes. "I am sorry about your sister. So am I." He dried his hands and reached for his coat. "I will check on you tomorrow, make sure you have everything you need. You do not have to keep coming back. I know." He settled his hat on his head, "but I am going to anyway." After he left, Lily sat by the fire for a long time, feeling the warmth seep into her bones and thinking about the strange, quiet man who had appeared like an answer to a prayer. She had not known how to pray. She thought about his sister, about loss and survival, about the unexpected ways people entered each other's lives. That night, she slept better than she had in weeks, the fire burning steady and warm, the darkness held at bay. True to his word, Mason returned the next day. The snow had eased to light flurries, and he brought more wood along with flour, sugar, and a jar of preserves. He did not stay long, just checked that she was well, added wood to the fire and left. But something had shifted in the air between them, a tentative connection that neither acknowledged but both felt. He came again the day after that, and the day after that. Sometimes he brought supplies, sometimes just wood, sometimes nothing but his presence and conversation. They talked about small things at first, safe topics like the weather and the town gossip. But gradually, as the days passed and they grew more comfortable with each other, their conversations deepened. Lily learned that Mason had grown up on a ranch outside of San Antonio, that he had learned to ride before he could properly walk, that he loved working with cattle and horses more than any other kind of work. He told her about the war without dwelling on the horrors, about the men he had served with and the places he had seen. He spoke of his parents, both long dead, and the sister he still mourned. He told her about his years of wandering, working ranches from Texas to Montana, never staying anywhere long enough to call it home. In turn, Lily told him about growing up in Weaverville, about the boom years when gold flowed freely, and the town swelled with hopeful prospectors. She told him about her father's modest success, enough to keep them comfortable but never wealthy, and about her mother's gentle nature and her love of reading. She described her work, the satisfaction of transforming torn fabric into something whole again, the quiet pride of being able to support herself. She told him about her loneliness, though she did not use that word, speaking instead of empty rooms and silent meals, and the weight of having no one to share her thoughts with. As January turned to February, the snow continued to fall, though less violently than before. Mason had found regular work helping the blacksmith, whose apprentice had left town before winter. He spent his mornings at the forge and his afternoons checking on Lily. He brought her sewing work from around town, mending jobs that needed doing, and she began to earn a little money again. Her cabin stayed warm, her pantry remained stocked, and slowly her strength returned. But more than physical strength, Lily felt something else growing inside her, something she hardly dared to name. She found herself listening for Mason's footsteps on the porch, found her heart lifting when he knocked on her door. She noticed things about him, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the gentleness of his hands despite their calloused strength, the sound of his laugh when she said something that amused him. She noticed how safe she felt in his presence, how the world seemed less harsh and overwhelming when he was near. She did not think about what would happen when spring came and the passes cleared. She did not let herself consider that Mason was a man who wandered, who had spent more than a decade moving from place to place. She lived in the present moment, in the warmth of his company and the growing bond between them. Mason, for his part, found himself thinking about Lily at odd moments throughout the day. He would be working at the forge and remember something she had said, the way her face lit up when she talked about a book she had read, the soft sound of her voice when she sang quietly to herself while sewing. He noticed the way her hair caught the firelight, the determined set of her jaw when she was concentrating, the kindness in her eyes when she spoke of her neighbors. He had not expected to stay in Weaverville this long. He had not expected to feel anything but passing sympathy for the young woman Mrs. Chen had told him about. But somewhere between that first frozen day and now, something had changed. Lily had become more than a responsibility, more than a reminder of his lost sister. She had become someone he looked forward to seeing, someone whose smile made the cold seem less bitter, someone he could imagine sitting with every evening for the rest of his life. That last thought scared him. He had spent so many years running, never letting himself get attached to any place or person, always moving on before roots could form. But here in this snowbound mountain town, with a dark-haired woman who had faced her despair with quiet dignity. He felt something he had not felt since before the war, the desire to stay. It was mid-February when the moment came that would change everything. The weather had cleared for a few days, and the town had emerged from its collective hibernation. People ventured out to socialize, to take care of business that had been delayed by the storms. Mason had finished early at the blacksmith's and decided to check on Lily sooner than usual. He arrived to find her door slightly ajar and voices coming from inside, one of them male and aggressive. Mason's hand went to the knife at his belt as he pushed the door open. Lily stood backed against the far wall of her cabin, her face pale, while a large man in dirty clothes blocked her path to the door. Mason recognized him as Jack Sullivan, a prospector with a reputation for drinking and violence. "I know your father had gold hidden somewhere," Sullivan was saying, his words slurred. "Everyone knows he did not trust the bank. You are going to tell me where it is." "There is no gold," Lily said, trying to keep her voice steady. "My father spent what he earned. There is nothing hidden." "You are lying." Sullivan took a step closer, and Lily pressed herself harder against the wall. "The lady said there is no gold." Mason's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Time for you to leave." Sullivan whirled around, his hand moving toward the pistol at his hip, but he was drunk and slow. Mason crossed the room in 3 long strides and caught Sullivan's wrist before the gun cleared its holster. He twisted, and Sullivan yelped in pain, the pistol clattering to the floor. "I said it is time to leave." Mason's voice was quiet but carried an edge of steel that made Sullivan's eyes go wide with fear despite his drunken state. "She has got gold," Sullivan whined, but he was already backing toward the door, cradling his twisted wrist. "What she has got is none of your concern. If I hear you have been bothering her again, if I hear you have even looked at her wrong, you will answer to me. Do we understand each other?" Sullivan nodded rapidly and stumbled out the door. Mason followed him onto the porch, watching until the man had disappeared down the snow-packed street. Then he picked up Sullivan's pistol, emptied the chambers, and tossed it into a snow bank before returning inside. Lily had not moved. She stood against the wall, her arms wrapped around herself, shaking. The fear she had held at bay while facing Sullivan now overwhelmed her, and tears streamed down her face. "Hey," Mason said softly, closing the door. "It is all right. He is gone." "He just pushed his way in," Lily said, her voice breaking. "I tried to shut the door, but he was too strong. I thought he was going to hurt me, I thought. But he did not, and he will not." Mason moved toward her slowly, giving her time to object, but she did not. When he was close enough, he opened his arms, and Lily stepped into them without hesitation. She pressed her face against his chest and sobbed, all the fear and tension and loneliness of the past months pouring out. Mason held her, one hand gentle on her back, the other cradling her head, murmuring reassurances that she barely heard but felt nonetheless. When the storm of tears finally passed, Lily became aware of where she was, held against the solid warmth of Mason's body, his heart beating steady beneath her ear. She should have felt embarrassed, but instead she felt safe, cherished in a way she had never experienced before. She pulled back slightly and looked up at him. "Thank you, if you had not come when you did. But I did come." His hands remained on her shoulders, steady and warm. "I will always come when you need me, Lily." The way he said her name, soft and certain, made her breath catch. She saw something shift in his eyes, saw the careful control he had maintained slip just a little. His gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes, a question in his expression. Lily answered by rising on her toes and pressing her lips to his. The kiss was tentative at first, questioning, but when Mason's arms tightened around her and he kissed her back, it deepened into something that stole her breath and made her heart race. She felt his hand slide into her hair, felt the careful restraint in his touch even as his kiss spoke of hunger and longing. When they finally parted, both breathing hard, Mason rested his forehead against hers. "I have been wanting to do that for weeks," he admitted. "So have I," Lily whispered. He pulled back enough to look into her eyes. "I need to tell you something. I need to be honest with you." Fear clutched at Lily's heart. "What is it?" "I am not a man who stays put. I have been moving from place to place for 13 years. I do not own land. I do not have savings. I do not have much of anything except what I can carry and the skills in my hands." He cupped her face gently. "But being here with you has made me want things I have not wanted since before the war. It has made me think about staying, about building something permanent. Are you saying you want to stay in Weaverville? I am saying I want to stay with you, wherever that is." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "But I need to know if that is something you want too. I need to know if you can care for a wandering cowboy who does not have much to offer except his heart and his promise to take care of you." Lily felt tears well up again, but these were different tears, born of hope and joy rather than fear. "Mason, you appeared when I had given up hope. You gave me warmth and food and kindness when I had nothing. You made me feel less alone, and somewhere along the way I started falling in love with you." His expression transformed, the careful guardedness falling away to reveal pure, unfiltered joy. "Say that again." "I love you," Lily said, clearer this time, certain. "I love you too," Mason said and kissed her again, deeper this time, a kiss that felt like a promise and a beginning. They stood there for a long time, holding each other, the fire crackling behind them, the world outside forgotten. When they finally moved apart, Mason kept her hand in his. "I am going to do this properly," he said. "I am going to court you the right way. I am going to prove to this town and to you that my intentions are honorable. And when enough time has passed that no one can say we rushed into things, I am going to ask you to marry me." "And I am going to say yes," Lily said, smiling through her tears. "You are supposed to let me ask first." "Then ask." He laughed, the sound filling the small cabin with warmth. "You are not going to make this easy on me, are you? I have never been accused of being easy." "Good," Mason said, pulling her close again. "I would not want you any other way." The rest of February and all of March passed in a blur of happiness. Mason continued to work at the blacksmith's, and Lily continued her sewing, but every free moment they spent together. He took her on walks through the snow-draped forest, showed her tracks, and taught her how to read the wilderness the way he did. She shared her books with him, reading aloud by the fire in the evenings while he mended her cabin roof and patched the walls against drafts. The town noticed, of course. In a place as small as Weaverville, nothing stayed secret for long. Mrs. Chen beamed with satisfaction, having taken credit for bringing them together. The blacksmith gave Mason a knowing look and a raise, saying he could use a permanent assistant who understood hard work. The women Lily sewed for smiled and asked when they might expect a wedding, their eyes twinkling with matchmaking delight. Mason, true to his word, courted Lily properly. He asked permission before holding her hand in public. He made sure they were never alone without the door open, or a neighbor nearby to preserve her reputation. He brought her small gifts, nothing expensive but thoughtful. A smooth river stone he found that was the exact blue of her eyes. A book he had saved up to buy from the general store. Wild flowers that somehow survived in the protected valley spots, even in late winter. April brought the first real thaw. Snow melted from the town streets, turning them into rivers of mud. The passes began to clear, and news came from the outside world for the first time in months. Spring was coming, and with it, the return of regular life. One evening in late April, Mason arrived at Lily's cabin carrying a blanket and a basket. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, and the air held the promise of warmth to come. "Come with me," he said, extending his hand. Lily took it without question. He led her out of town and up a gentle slope to a meadow that overlooked the valley. The snow was gone here, and early wildflowers were beginning to push through the earth. Mason spread the blanket and they sat, watching the sun sink behind the mountains. "I came to Weaverville with no intention of staying," Mason said, his hand finding hers. "I was just passing through, killing time until I could move on to the next place, the next job. I had convinced myself that moving was the same as living, that not staying anywhere meant not losing anything." He turned to face her fully, his expression serious and tender. "And then I met you, and you made me remember what I had forgotten, that life is not about avoiding loss. It is about finding something worth keeping, something worth fighting for. You made me want to stop running." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Lily's breath caught as he opened it to reveal a simple gold band set with a small, clear stone. "It is not much," Mason said, "but it is honest, bought with honest wages from honest work, just like I will always be honest with you." He took her hand. "Lily Vaughn, I love you with everything I am. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life making sure you never lose hope again?" Lily was crying but smiling so wide her face hurt. "Yes, yes, of course yes." Mason slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. Then he kissed her as the sun disappeared behind the mountains and the stars began to appear overhead. They were married 6 weeks later, in early June, in the small church with the whole town in attendance. Lily wore a dress she had made herself, simple white cotton with lace at the collar that had been her mother's. Mason wore new clothes, bought specially for the occasion, looking uncomfortable but handsome in the formal attire. Reverend Thomas, back from his extended visit, performed the ceremony with great solemnity and joy when Mason said, "I do." His voice was steady and sure. When Lily said the same, hers was soft but certain. And when the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife and Mason kissed his bride, the congregation erupted in applause and cheers. The reception was held at the boarding house, with Mrs. Chen providing an elaborate meal that must have taken days to prepare. There was music and dancing, and for once the rough mining town felt like a real community, everyone coming together to celebrate the union of two people who had found each other in the darkest part of winter. As the evening wore on and the celebration continued, Mason and Lily slipped away, walking hand in hand through the warm June night back to the cabin that was now their home. Mason had spent the past weeks making improvements, adding a proper bedroom, reinforcing the roof, building new furniture. It was still small, still modest, but it was theirs. Inside, with the door closed and the candles lit, they stood facing each other. Lily felt suddenly shy, aware that everything was about to change, that they were crossing a threshold into something new and unknown. Mason seemed to sense her nervousness. He took her hands and brought them to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "We do not have to rush anything. We have all the time in the world." "I am not nervous about that," Lily said, though she was a little. "I am just thinking about how different everything is from 6 months ago, how close I came to giving up, how you saved me." "You saved yourself," Mason corrected gently. "You survived. I just helped a little." "You did more than help a little. When the snow took my last hope, you became it. You stood there and showed me that hope was still possible, that better days were coming." She reached up to cup his bearded cheek. "You are my hope, Mason. You always will be." He turned his face to kiss her palm. "And you are mine. You are my reason to stay, my reason to build instead of run, my reason to believe in tomorrow." He pulled her close. I love you, Lily Parker. I am going to spend every day proving it. Then start now, she whispered and kissed him. The months that followed were the happiest of Lily's life. She and Mason fell into an easy rhythm, working during the day and spending their evenings together, talking and reading and simply enjoying each other's company. Mason left the blacksmith shop and found work at a ranch down in the valley, tending cattle and horses. The pay was better, and he came home each evening tired but satisfied, doing the work he loved. Lily continued her sewing, but also took on work at the general store a few days a week, helping Mrs. Henderson with accounts and inventory. The extra income allowed them to save, to plan for a future that was beginning to take shape in their minds. By the time winter returned, they were ready for it. Their cabin was tight and warm, their pantry was full, and their woodshed was stocked. But more than that, they had each other. The storms that had seemed so threatening the year before were now just inconveniences, easily weathered when faced together. It was during this second winter that Lily realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but had not said anything, wanting to be sure before she raised Mason's hopes. But when she finally told him, on a quiet January evening by the fire, his reaction was everything she had hoped for and more. He went very still, his eyes searching her face as if to make sure he had heard correctly. "You are certain as I can be. I think the baby will come in late summer." Mason let out a whoop of joy that startled her into laughter. He picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down again, suddenly cautious. "I am sorry. Should I not have done that? I do not want to hurt you or the baby." "I am pregnant, not made of glass," Lily said, still laughing, "but maybe save the spinning for after the baby arrives." He knelt in front of her, placing his hands gently on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby, a family." "We already are a family," Lily pointed out, "but yes, we are going to grow it." Mason looked up at her and she saw tears in his eyes. "I never thought I would have this. After the war, after losing everyone, I thought I was meant to be alone. And now I have you, and soon I will have a child. I do not know what I did to deserve this much happiness." Lily knelt down beside him and took his face in her hands. "You deserve this and more. You are a good man, Mason Parker. You are going to be a wonderful father." "I hope so," he said quietly. "I am going to try my best." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Lily felt well most of the time, aside from some tiredness and occasional nausea in the early months. Mason was attentive to the point of being overprotective, insisting she not lift anything heavy and worrying whenever she seemed the slightest bit tired. Lily tolerated his fussing with good humor, knowing it came from love and perhaps a little fear of loss. As her belly grew through spring and into summer, they prepared for the baby's arrival. Mason built a cradle with his own hands, working carefully to make sure every joint was smooth and strong. Lily sewed tiny clothes, marveling at how small they were, trying to imagine the person who would wear them. They argued playfully about names, testing out options and discarding them, waiting to see if the baby would be a boy or girl before making a final decision. In late August, on a warm evening when the crickets sang in the grass and the stars blazed overhead, Lily's labor began. Mrs. Chen came to help, along with 2 other women from town who had experience with childbirth. Mason was banished to the porch, where he paced like a caged animal, listening to the sounds from inside and feeling more helpless than he had ever felt in his life. The labor was long but not difficult. Lily was strong, and the baby was healthy and eager to arrive. When the first cry split the night air, Mason nearly broke down the door in his hurry to get inside. "You have a son," Mrs. Chen announced, beaming as she handed the wrapped bundle to Lily. Mason approached the bed slowly, almost reverently. Lily looked exhausted but radiant, her hair damp with sweat, her eyes shining with tears and joy. In her arms was the smallest person Mason had ever seen, red-faced and squalling with a surprising amount of dark hair. "Come meet your father," Lily said softly, and Mason sat carefully on the edge of the bed. He looked down at his son, and something fundamental shifted inside him. All the wandering, all the years of running, all the loss and pain of his past, it all fell away. This tiny person, this perfect combination of him and Lily, was his future. This was what hope looked like. "Hello, little one," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I am your papa. I have been waiting to meet you." The baby's cries quieted at the sound of his voice. Dark eyes opened, unfocused but searching, and Mason was lost. He reached out one calloused finger and the baby's tiny hand wrapped around it, holding tight. "He is perfect," Mason whispered. "Absolutely perfect." "What should we call him?" Lily asked. They had discussed names endlessly, but had not been able to agree on one. Now, looking at his son, Mason knew exactly what his name should be. "Samuel," he said, "after your father. So he always knows where he came from, so he carries a good man's name into the future." Lily's eyes filled with fresh tears. "Samuel Parker. Yes, that is exactly right." They spent the rest of the night in quiet wonder, taking turns holding their son, marveling at his tiny fingers and toes, the perfect shell of his ears, the way he yawned and stretched. As dawn broke over the mountains, painting the world in gold and rose, their little family of 3 sat together in the small cabin, and everything was exactly as it should be. The years that followed were full and good. Samuel grew into a bright, energetic boy with his mother's blue eyes and his father's quiet determination. 2 years after Samuel, Lily gave birth to a daughter they named Rose, who inherited her father's gray eyes and her mother's gentle spirit. 3 years after that came another boy, James, who from the moment of his birth seemed determined to keep everyone on their toes with his adventurous nature. Mason continued to work on the ranch, and his skill with horses and cattle earned him a promotion to foreman. The steady income allowed them to buy a small piece of land just outside town, where they built a larger house with room for their growing family. Mason planted an orchard and built a barn, and Lily started a garden that became the envy of the county. The house was always full of noise and life, children playing and laughing, friends and neighbors stopping by, the sounds of living spilling out through open windows. It was everything Mason had never dared to dream of during those long, lonely years of wandering. It was home in the truest sense of the word. Lily thrived in motherhood, her natural warmth and kindness extending to her children and creating a home that was full of love and laughter. She still took in sewing occasionally, more for the pleasure of the work than the income, and she became known throughout the region for her skill. But her true joy was her family, watching her children grow and spending her evenings with the man who had saved her life and won her heart. On their 10th anniversary, Mason took Lily back to the meadow where he had proposed. The children were with Mrs. Chen for the night, and they had the evening to themselves, a rare luxury with 3 young ones. They sat on the same spot, watching the same sunset, and Lily marveled at how much had changed and how much had stayed the same. Mason's beard was shot through with gray now, and there were lines around his eyes that had not been there when they met. She knew she had changed too, that motherhood and time had left their marks on her body. But when Mason looked at her, she saw the same love and wonder in his eyes that had been there that first night. "You ever regret it?" Lily asked. "Giving up your wandering, settling down?" Mason turned to her, genuinely surprised. Not once, not for a single moment. He took her hand, his thumb tracing the gold band that had worn smooth over the years. Everything I thought I was looking for out there, moving from place to place, I found right here with you. Home is not a place, Lily. It is a person. It has always been you." "I think about that night sometimes," Lily said. "That first night when you came to my door with firewood, I had given up. I thought that was the end, and then you appeared and everything changed." "When the snow took your last hope, I became it," Mason said, echoing words he had said to her many times over the years, words that had become part of their story. "And you know what? You became mine too. We saved each other." Lily leaned her head on his shoulder, watching the sun paint the sky in brilliant colors. "I love you, Mason Parker. I love the life we have built, the family we have made. I love every moment of our story." "It is a good story," Mason agreed, wrapping his arm around her, "and it is far from over." He was right. The years continued to roll by, bringing their share of joys and challenges. Samuel grew into a fine young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did, and eventually took over as foreman when Mason decided to slow down. Rose became a teacher, her gentle patience perfect for working with children, and married a kind rancher's son from the valley. James, true to his adventurous spirit, joined the territorial rangers and had many exciting tales to share when he came home for visits. Mason and Lily grew old together, their hair turning white, their steps slowing, but their love never diminishing. They spent their later years in the house Mason had built, surrounded by children and grandchildren who filled the rooms with noise and love. They would sit on the porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching the sun set over the mountains, and Lily would sometimes think back to that desperate, freezing night when all hope had seemed lost. She would think about the knock on her door, about the tall stranger with kind eyes who had appeared like an answer to a prayer. She would think about how close she had come to giving up, and how grateful she was that she had held on just a little longer, just long enough for Mason to find her. And Mason, sitting beside her, would think about his years of wandering, about how lost he had been even though he was always moving. He would think about the sister he had lost, and the guilt he had carried, and how helping Lily had somehow healed that old wound. He would think about the moment he first saw her, half frozen and proud, and how something in his heart had recognized something in hers, a kindred spirit, a missing piece. On a warm summer evening in 1910, 32 years after they first met, Mason and Lily sat on that same porch, surrounded by 3 generations of the family they had created. Samuel was there with his wife and their 4 children. Rose had come from the valley with her husband and their 2 sons. James had arrived the day before, taking leave from his duties to celebrate his parents' anniversary. As the sun set and the children played in the yard and the adults talked and laughed, Mason leaned over to Lily and whispered, "You remember what I said to you that first day? About hope?" Lily smiled, remembering, "You said a lot of things that day. I told you that when the snow took your last hope, I became it. I said hope was standing right here." He squeezed her hand gently. "I was right, but not in the way I thought. Hope was not just me, it was us. It was this." He gestured to the scene around them, to the family they had built, to the life they had created together. "Hope is standing right here," Lily repeated softly, the words that had become their promise, their reminder of where they started and how far they had come. "It has been here all along, growing stronger every day." As darkness fell and the stars emerged, the family moved inside, but Mason and Lily stayed on the porch a little longer, holding hands and listening to the sounds of love and laughter drifting through the open windows. They had started with nothing but hope in each other, 2 lost souls finding their way in the middle of a harsh winter. And they had built something beautiful, something lasting, something that would continue long after they were gone. The snow had taken everything from Lily that winter in 1878, but it had also brought her Mason. And Mason, the wandering cowboy who thought he would never stop running, had found his home in a dark-haired woman with kind eyes and a spirit that refused to break. They had saved each other, and in doing so, had created a love story that would be told by their grandchildren and great-grandchildren, a reminder that hope can appear in the most unexpected forms, that love can bloom in the coldest season, and that sometimes the end of everything is just the beginning of something beautiful. When the snow took her last hope, the cowboy became it. And for the rest of their long, happy lives together, hope stood right there beside them. In every sunrise they watched together, in every child they raised, in every moment of joy and sorrow they shared. Hope was standing right here, and it always would be, as long as they had each other. Many years later, when both Mason and Lily had passed peacefully in their sleep within months of each other, their children found letters they had written to each generation. Mason's letter talked about the importance of family, of putting down roots, of choosing love over fear. Lily's letter spoke of resilience, of holding on even when hope seems lost, of opening your door to kindness when it knocks. But the most treasured item found among their belongings was a simple piece of paper, yellowed with age, on which Mason had written in his careful hand, "When the snow took her last hope, I became it, and she became mine. Hope is not just standing here. Hope is home. Hope is love. Hope is each other. And that is all we ever needed." The family framed those words and hung them in the house Mason had built, where they remain to this day, a reminder of two people who found each other in the darkest moment and created a legacy of love that would endure for generations. The story of Mason and Lily Parker became part of Weaverville's history, told around fires and dinner tables, a testament to the power of hope, the strength of love, and the magic that can happen when two lonely souls find their way to each other through a winter storm. Their graves sit side by side on a hill overlooking the valley, with a simple stone that bears both their names and a single line: "Hope is standing right here." Visitors to the cemetery often pause at that stone, wondering about the story behind those words, not knowing that they represent one of the truest love stories ever lived. A reminder that even in the coldest winter, even when all seems lost, hope can walk through your door in the form of a stranger with kind eyes and a giving heart. And on snowy winter evenings, when the wind howls through Weaverville and the cold seems endless, people still tell the story of the woman who nearly froze and the cowboy who saved her, not just with firewood and food, but with something far more precious: the hope that led to love, and the love that led to home, and the home that became a legacy that would outlast them both and warm the hearts of all who heard their tale. In the end, Mason and Lily's story was not just about survival or even love, though it was certainly both. It was about the transformative power of human connection, about how a single act of kindness can change the course of two lives, about how hope, once found, can multiply and spread until it fills not just a heart or a home, but generations to come. It was about two people who had every reason to give up, but chose instead to hold on, to open up, to let love in when it knocked on the door during a blizzard, carrying firewood and forever. And that, perhaps, is the truest definition of hope. Not the absence of despair, but the presence of someone who stands beside you and says, without words but with every action, "You are not alone. I am here. We will face this together." Mason had been that person for Lily, and Lily had been that person for Mason. And together they had built a life that proved hope is not just something you find or lose. Hope is something you become for each other, something you create together, something that stands right here in every moment of love shared, every challenge faced together, every tomorrow built on the foundation of today. The snow that had nearly taken Lily's life had instead brought her the greatest gift she would ever receive. And the cowboy, who had been running from home for 13 years, had finally found it in the arms of a woman who had been ready to give up. They had saved each other, and in doing so, had created something that would never be lost to any winter, no matter how harsh. A love that would warm all who knew them, a family that would carry their legacy forward, and a story that would be told for generations as proof that hope is always standing right here, waiting to be recognized, waiting to be embraced, waiting to change everything.